The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining today's Telerik Test Studio webinar presented by Progress. We're going to go ahead and just wait one more minute before we get started as a few folks are just coming into this session. So please stand by and we'll start here shortly. All right, great. Again, thank you everyone for joining today's Test Studio webinar presented by Progress. Today we're going to be presenting myself, Andy Wieland, and I'm joined by Peter Grigorev, as well as Ilyan Panchev, Product Manager, Sales Engineer, and CSMs. A couple of housekeeping items for the webinar. Today's session is being recorded, and a recording will be made available following the session. All the attendees are muted, so you can be as loud as you'd like. Also, along the way, if there's any trouble or issues or questions you may have, please feel free to use the question panel or the chat panel. We'll have folks actively answering those questions for you along the way. Also, we'll be following up with a blog post of the top questions that we've found from the session and the video too. Along the way too, we're going to also have some poll questions for you to participate in. Please, if you could, we'd love to hear from you in those poll questions, so please definitely contribute there. Today's agenda, we're going to be looking through Test Studio. First of all, looking at the 5 failures you can't afford, talking about then who owns testing in your organization, how you might look at choosing a solution, and then more specifically, who uses Test Studio and what makes it so reliable, and then also how it integrates into the DevOps pipeline. And of course, we've got some great demonstration parts as well for you today. So the 5 failures you can't afford. When it comes to testing, one of the biggest failures is failing to catch a critical bug that makes it into production. Typically, this is a pretty embarrassing feeling when you have something that leaks out like that. FOMO, you might feel this, if you're missing out when you're not utilizing your team to the fullest. You may, in some cases, feel cheated by failing to build maintainable tests or having tests that are difficult to maintain. Exhaustion, when you're failing by investing in the wrong tools. And lastly, maybe the feeling of being broken when you're failing to be agile. So at this point, we're going to ask our first poll question. Please feel free to contribute with your responses as to maybe what failures resonate most with your organization or your testing currently. We'll give you a few moments to make your selections before we continue. Great. Lots of responses coming in. We appreciate that. I'll give you just a few more moments here if you want to add your response as well. All right, thank you so much. We'll go ahead and continue on with the session here. So now that we understand the feeling of failure and what may come from that, let's talk about who owns testing. So a lot of organizations we work with maybe come to us with manual testing. Manual testing gives you a low technical kind of approach. Doesn't require a whole lot of skill to keep manual testing going. However, if your project grows and your testing grows, to be able to keep up with the demands of an agile, DevOps environment, to go faster, you also ultimately have to have more manual testers and continue to add manual testers and enable you to be more quickly able to deliver the application to the market. Now, another group that we hear from a lot is where the devs own testing, and this really is adding a whole nother project or product to your technical debt, maintaining tests through code and so forth. And in this case, to go faster, you have to hire more devs. Now, most companies that come to us actually have both of these. They actually have a QA/BA team that's doing the low technical testing or non-technical, maybe manual testing, as well as the developers doing the more technical testing. Of course, this is obviously, most test developers are using unit testing. This is really speaking more to the UI and functional testing aspects of it. But oftentimes we do hear from companies that they have more than one group that's contributing, but maybe not collaborating and doing kind of things separately. Where a lot of our customers come in, they want to involve really both technical and non-technical resources. They typically like to push this needle to the left, making overall testing less technical so that it removes the burden from the development team. That way they can focus on building features instead of maintaining tests. So this is typically where a lot of our customers like to be, is kind of pushing that needle a little bit more to the left. And all of this, of course, without getting in the way of the speed of development. Now, the beauty of Test Studio is it doesn't matter where this needle is on the spectrum. You can be more technical, you can do everything through code, you can be less technical and do all you need from the codeless kind of approach too. But ultimately, what's most important is having the right testing strategy that allows everybody to be a part of it, to contribute, and to collaborate. So in choosing your solution, let's see here, make sure I have my up. Let's go ahead and actually have the next poll question for you. Basically, who's owning testing in your organization? And if you don't mind, please put in your answers, and we'll give you a minute to respond to that. Again, thank you for contributing to the poll. And we're going to actually continue back to the presentation now. So really, when you're looking at choosing a solution for test automation, there's those main three categories. Again, open source. Really, from an open source standpoint, a lot of people are attracted to this because there's no cost, right? At least initially, you think there's no money needed to get things started. However, it does require a pretty good amount of skill from the get-go to be able to stand up a framework, integrate it to your current DevOps environment. And there's really not necessarily a built-in collaboration component to that. So that is not typically a very good strength of open source. And time to market can be a bit dodgy on this. From the manual testing side, you see there's a lot more money involved in upfront investment to build out a team, but the skill level required isn't as high. Obviously, these are folks that know the application the best and work with the customers, understand the workflows and the ins and outs of the application. But the testing type in this case is typically, is manual essentially. So no technology necessarily needed in completing that. However, it doesn't necessarily come with a collaboration or built-in kind of model to collaborate with the development team. And of course, again, it could be a sketchy time to market when you're doing so. With Test Studio, you're looking at a moderate upfront investment with the tooling. The technical skill required, again, we've tried to minimize that. However, you can approach it from any level, but we really don't require a high level of skills. So it's a really nice environment for manual testers or non-technical users to work in, and really empowers that team by giving them the tool set that makes them a lot more powerful. In addition, it's a strong environment for collaboration. We're going to show you some of that today, working between development and QA on the same project. Ultimately, this results in zippy time to market, so we can continue to innovate and continuously deliver the application. So overall, how do these solutions match up? Well, in my vote, open source fails. Typically, it can grow out of proportion. You're managing a large project and a large set of tests trying to maintain that. It takes away from the developer's time that's supposed to be focused on building the actual application. So we see that as a fail. In manual testing, certainly there's always going to be manual testing, but really we're trying to remove that burden and stop doing the redundant things, because ultimately when you have a test project, you have to test everything from the beginning to the end of the project. So as you're adding new features, you're still going back and testing things that you've built in the beginning. So this is difficult to keep up with an Agile process as well. Test Studio, however, it gives you the tooling to keep things simple and the ability to maintain things in the long run and stay in an Agile framework and basically be able to continuously improve and deploy your application. So one more poll for you, and I swear we'll get on with the show. So one more poll, if you could answer this last question: how do you currently test your applications? And we'll give you a minute to respond to that. All right, great, and thank you again for everybody for participating in the poll. Back over to the show now. So with Test Studio, we talk about everyone having a seat at the table. The table itself is typically where we'll see the initiatives, the Agile DevOps initiatives, and essentially here we see the folks around the table. On the left, we have our developer. The developer is often involved in the testing by some extent, whether it's by owning it or in the Test Studio world. A lot of times they can be involved in helping the non-technical resources when there are cases that might require code or might require a helper class type of file. So certainly they are involved in the process. And of course, we have an endpoint for you as a developer called Test Studio Dev Edition. This is a Visual Studio plugin that allows you to tap into the Test Studio project, work on the same project that the non-technical testers and the QA testers are working on. Of course, we have the QA tester here too. And from that license standpoint, we have Test Studio Web and Desktop that is commonly used by the non-technical users with the standalone Test Studio environment. And of course, the Test Studio Ultimate for the more technical testers, the QA or developer, the SDET, that might be doing all sorts of testing in addition to functional and UI. They might be doing load and performance testing, maybe mobile and API testing as well. Of course, anyone can use any of these three. And something to mention too is the ultimate version of Test Studio does give you access to the Visual Studio plugin. So you can get that as part of our DevCraft bundle or as part of the Test Studio Ultimate package as well. And of course, the post of the table here holding everything up, the source control, the integration points to bug tracking, build integrations, and even test results too. So what makes Test Studio's tests bulletproof? Really, there's a lot of things that differentiate Test Studio. One being we have the ability to codelessly test, to record and execute and maintain the tests, and that's an important part. Test maintenance over time typically becomes a very big burden, no matter if it's manual or developer driven. We've really tried to make Test Studio something that continue to maintain those tests in a way that doesn't require code. Cross-browser test record and execution. With our unique element identification logic strategy, our tests can work across browsers. You can also use our Test Studio runtime agents to build out a lab of machines that might represent different browser versions and so forth. But one Test Studio test can run across all the major browsers. This saves you a lot of time and reduces your total project size. And then another one here, intelligent element find logic. With our flexible find logic, it's customizable, so you can work with different elements or different identifiers for your application. Really, with our own proprietary patented framework, Test Studio does not rely on XPaths, although that is something you could use in Test Studio. We have a much more sophisticated and stronger way of delivering element logic that you're going to see in the demonstration. and it allows you to adjust. So as new technologies come out, for instance, as React and as Angular came out, we didn't have to do anything to rebuild Test Studio's framework. It's already built in a way where you can actually just add in the attributes and the tags that work with the new technology and continue with your project. A few more of these. We also have built-in translators that open up elements to Test Studio so it can understand how to work with these. Now, we do have base translators that understand third-party and custom controls, as well as our own translators specifically for Telerik controls. So things like your Kendo Rad Grid or Kendo Grids, your Ajax controls, your WPF. We have translators in there that understand how to work with those and give you some bonus features as well. Now, another new thing that we've just added with our latest release in June, a very exciting part of Test Studio that makes your tests even more bulletproof, is an industry-first combination that leverages not just our fine logic strategy that we've had forever, but also now an image-based element identification too. This really cuts down on test maintenance. It makes your tests more stable. It means when the test can't find a particular element by the logic, it can go use the element image and still locate and still execute that test with the image as a backup method. And again, we'll show you some of that in practice as well. Lastly, our industry-leading tech support. We have very high marks, 95% satisfaction rating on our support team, and actually it's probably even higher than that at this point. But basically, this is where you can go get help along the way. In comparison to open source, you're not out there on your own. You don't have to just go find solutions in a forum and figure out what's going to work. You can ask us. You have access to our support team directly through Test Studio and an unlimited number of tickets that you can submit to work with our team. So what does Test Studio do? We work with functional testing of the UI across all types of web applications. We also have the Visual Studio plugins so that your development team and your QA team both have an environment to work on the same projects. You also can do manual testing in Test Studio. We incorporate that so that you have a one-stop shop. So if you are still doing some manual testing, you can certainly create those tests in Test Studio, execute them with our manual test executor or manual test runner, and have them stored alongside of your automated tests as well. We also have our load testing and performance testing, both of those leveraging the functional tests. So there's a lot of reuse in Test Studio that lets you create a functional test, run that same test as a performance test, and even incorporate that same test into load test. So it's, again, reducing the total number of tests that you have in your project, reducing the maintenance time overall as well. And then, of course, mobile testing. You can create mobile tests for iOS and Android on real devices or simulators and emulators. And we've also added API testing in the last couple of years so that you can test your REST and your web API calls and record and playback on all of these. So from functional testing, mobile testing, and API testing, they all have that same ability of recording and capturing and then easily executing in a low code or codeless way. All of those also do have the ability to code everything if you wanted to. However, we've built so much tooling up that it's usually not required to have much code, if at all. Now, automating tests, we work on all sorts of different types of technologies. As I mentioned before, when like Angular and React came out, we didn't have to rebuild our framework. There was no delay in providing the solution to our customers. Because of the way we've built our framework, it's easy to adjust for newer technologies as they come out. And also, of course, with our own Telerik controls, with our translators built in, we continue to update those so that gives you an added advantage and a bonus when you're working with our own controls as well. And if you are looking at mobile development, of course, we have our TypeScript-based native script where you can create a shared code repository for truly native applications across iOS and Android. And of course, we have a real easy integration path to work with those mobile applications that are built on native script. So from a DevOps standpoint, where do we integrate? We integrate with source control right out of the box to Git and TFS, which is now Azure DevOps. We integrate right out of the box with bug tracking tools to Jira and TFS again. And we integrate with tons of CI and build servers. Like we have a Jenkins plugin. We work with Azure, Bamboo, TF, TeamCity, really anything that you might want to call from a command line you can do as well. So lots of different ways that you can integrate into your current ecosystem and your current DevOps pipeline. Lastly, I wanted to mention the Fiddler integration. For those of you that may be familiar with Fiddler, Fiddler has been in the Progress family and the Telerik family for now about 4 or 5 years. Fiddler is a very popular debugging tool, and actually Test Studio is built, has components that are built on Fiddler core that help us capture traffic for load sessions, API tests, performance tests, and even the mobile tests as well. So Fiddler is built into Test Studio, and of course you can actually capture things in Fiddler if you prefer that environment, maybe to use some capturing. You can import those into Test Studio as well. But just know under the hood, Fiddler is part of Test Studio by its nature. One last thing before we jump into demo, just wanted to pass along some of the survey data that we got back from customers recently. The Test Studio helped them to decrease their testing cycles by 44%. And this was only considering only about a quarter to half of their application that's currently automated. So a lot of these customers were still building tests towards a higher percentage of automation. But even at 50% of automation, they were seeing almost half of the testing cycle as they were before. So now let's get into some demo. So heading over to Test Studio here. We'll bring this over on screen. So inside of Test Studio, we've got a pretty easy environment to work with. And actually one of the things that people really love about Test Studio is how easy it is to work with. Before I jump into a project though, I just want to show a couple new features that we have on our startup screen. If you haven't yet seen it, or if you haven't been in Test Studio before, you can see we've added a news feed so you can easily stay up to date with the latest blog posts and articles and things that we're putting out. Also, of course, if you've got recent projects here and the connection into source control and so forth. We've also enhanced the Getting Started page with a lot more links to videos and tutorials and even some sample projects to help you get started too. We'll jump in and open this directly from TFS in this case. And oops, let me get in the right project there. And this will pull down our project for us. So now I'm accessing the source control, that central repository where we can all keep the tests stored in source control and the versioning and the conflict resolution that it has as well. So this really helps in making sure that everybody's on the same page and that I have the latest version of my tests in front of me. So as you can see, it's pulling this down. We'll also have some connection options to check in and check out and get latest with this as well, and some indicators that show us what the status of those tests are from source control. A couple new things I want to point out too that are here. We've continued to build on and add on more tips and tricks. So if you're looking for help in understanding where things are in Test Studio or how to get things accomplished, we've added lots of tips and tricks in here for you and videos and articles. As well, we actually have a brand new feature. Open up a test here for you. We have a brand new feature that is a guide that can take you through, kind of show you around how step by step to work through a particular issue or a particular challenge that you might have. So a couple new features there that will help you along the way as well. Now, as I mentioned, a lot of folks are really drawn to Test Studio because of the UI and the environment. It's not just a glorified spreadsheet that you're working with. It's a workshop built on top of a patented framework that allows for anybody from a non-technical to a technical background to come in and contribute and be part of the testing process as well. As you can see, I've got a folder structure represented here, and we can easily add to that. We also have, of course, the step builder, and these are all dockable panels, so you can really modify your environment, shape it to the way that works for you for whatever task you might be working on that particular occasion. And this makes it very easy to work with and have everything you need. We also do have some presets that are built in too. If you'd like to go back to a specific preset here, you can easily do that, like high productivity, for example. And that brings my tabs back to where I want. But this makes it very easy so you can pin things out of the way, get your environment set up, and make sure that whatever challenge you're working on or whatever tests you might be doing, you have the tooling that you need around you. So what we're going to be focusing on today is really how some of our most productive customers use Test Studio for easy teaming and collaboration between developers and testers. So to begin, we're going to create a basic test here, something that should be pretty recognizable to everyone, I hope, called the Amazon search test. And we're just going to hit, we're going to go ahead and open up that test to start it up. So first we're going to show you how easy it is to create a test and to use the record and playback capabilities in Test Studio. So I have my test open. I'm going to hit record. You can see I've got some recent URLs in here, although I can populate this with a new one. And when you're recording, you can choose from any of these three browsers. We have 3 that you can record from, 5 that you can execute against, with the idea being we're going to produce one test that can run across all of them. The beauty of this too is I could actually record parts of this test in Chrome, parts of it in Firefox, and really mix and match, because ideally we're going to have one test that runs across all of them. We'll start by recording in Chrome. This will start up my browser, it will navigate to the page, and it will attach the recorder for us at the bottom. And I'll do my best here to share my screen. Usually this is really well served on a dual monitor environment, but since we're presenting on a GoToWebinar, we're going to try to do our best to kind of share the real estate here. So I'm going to just push this a little bit over to the side. And here in the background, you can see that it's already captured my navigate step. So very cleanly, very easily, we're just going to add in drone. As you can see, the recording is just capturing the elements, and it's adding those elements to our element repository. It's also capturing those actions as well along the way. And we can go ahead and just hit search at this point. You see that it captures that. So very easy to create these tests as you go. So now we have our search function. I'm going to add one more thing by using our element highlighter. This is a very powerful part of Test Studio because it gives you the ability to float over and see all of the elements that make up your UI and add in verifications and different actions that you might want to invoke on those elements. So this is a critical part of Test Studio. It also helps your test be more bulletproof when you're adding in verifications. So I'm going to add a verification that this sort by shows up to basically make sure that we get to this results screen. So we've added that verification in there, and now we have our basic test. I do want to point out one more thing before we jump into the next phase. In the verifications, in the quick steps here, you also have an option to use extract, which I'll show later and used in the test. But this is actually where you can grab a value from the UI that you might want to use as a variable. So if you think about a dynamic ID that's generated during a testing CRUD operation, you might, in the create process, extract that ID from the create test, pass it into the update test and the delete test as well. So great way to get at some variables that you might use for data in your tests. All right, so now we have a complete test. We navigate, we type in drone, we click submit, and then we verify that the result comes back. So let's just give this a quick execution. We recorded it on Chrome, so let's go ahead and execute this on a different browser. We'll execute it on IE here to begin with. And of course, that's going to open on the wrong screen. All right, so put drone in, and then it should verify that my sort by shows up. And as you can see, the steps there are showing up. And we have a passing test. Here you can see the log. It shows us the environment, the browser we were executing against, all the steps that passed, and how long it took to run that test. Now, a common issue that we run into with test automation is UI changes, and tests can break very easily when maybe an element is changed or breaks. And that means you either have to repair the test or rebuild the test, which means you don't have any reliability as if you're continuing to rebuild your tests. So really either way, it's time that you're losing. Well, with Test Studio, let me go ahead and show you how we can, first of all, I'm going to break this test. I'm just going to jump in and edit this element. And as I'm doing so, I just want to show you as well some of this ease of use. When you click on a particular test step, you see the Test Studio actually points to the corresponding element. So it's captured these elements for me automatically. It stores them centrally in the element repository. And if I need to make a modification to that element, I can simply right click and choose edit element, and it brings me into our element editing window. Now we're going to come back and spend a little bit more time in here a little later, but for now what I'm going to do is just break this element by actually changing the value it's looking for. So currently it was looking for a tag name, an input that had the value of go. Now it's using is exactly at this point, so now it's going to be looking for goat, which should essentially break it, and that way giving us the opportunity to look at what a failure might look like. Now, when I change an element, you can see that this element ideally this is great. It's used by all sorts of tests in my project. We want to see element reuse like this. This is a really good sign that we're not creating duplication, but that we're actually, oops, let me make sure I save that. We're not creating duplication. We're actually seeing that it references that. Another way we can see that is if we go to an element and choose use by, you can see all of the tests and all of the steps that use that particular element. So again, it's that reuse, it's simplifying things for you. And again, a good point to point out is when I go to edit an element, I have a GUI interface and some other tooling that we're going to see in a little bit later that helps me easily update this element without code. So jumping back, now we have a broken submit button. I'm going to go ahead and replay this test again. This time we'll choose yet another browser so we can continue to kind of see how this runs cross browser. So we'll choose Firefox for this iteration. And let me bring this over on the screen. So again, it puts drone in the search field. And this is where it's looking for the search icon. Now, Test Studio naturally has a timeout. So we're giving it up to 15 seconds by default to locate the element. In this case, it's looking for the magnifying glass. And if it can't find it in 15 seconds, it will fail the test. All right, so we did have a failure here. And oops, we had to pass on that one. Actually, let me make sure real quick to turn off a quick setting. So I want to make sure to show you what the failure actually looks like here. Here we go. My apologies, I had that setting incorrect. So I'm gonna actually rerun this one more time because I really want step 3 to fail. That was the one that we expected to fail. So that I can show you some of our brand new image-based search. Okay, so this is traditional backup search that Test Studio uses. It's gonna do the same test. This time it should fail to find the submit button for us, which is what I was hoping to do in the last iteration. And then we could take a look at that failure data that's provided for us. I'll also then show you how that image search can be utilized and enabled to pass the test even when it may not be able to find that element. So now we have the appropriate failure that I was looking for. When you have a test step failure, you can double click the red X and see the full failure details. Failure details, when we're comparing this to a manual testing approach, it would take you quite a bit to gather this information. So this is all done automatically by Test Studio. You can see that it was unable to locate the element using the value goat. It was looking for the submit button. There is a backup search that it looks like it found. So we do have a backup search already built into Test Studio that's looking for it based off an XPath. This is not necessarily how we would solve the problem, but it does provide us some friendly solutions. So we'll see that in a moment. Before I jump into that, let me just show you around a little bit. We have a complete test log. It shows us the browser and version there. It shows us the step that failed, some of that failure details for you, and how long it took to execute that. So this is essentially your steps to reproduce the issue. We have an exception log as well that gets generated. And we have images that show us the expected state on the right and the failed state on the left. So we can clearly see that it was there, that it should have found that. And these screenshots are captured automatically for you. We also incorporate the page DOM at the point of failure, and this might not be very useful for a non-technical QA, but it is very useful for the development team to see what was happening on the page behind the scenes when that failure occurred. Now, resolve failure gives us the chance to fix the broken element. So this is one spot right here. I could fix this issue. It's telling me it had a problem with GOAT, and it's brought back suggestions. It actually used XPath to find these suggestions. So this is not the answer, it's the bridge to the answer. So ultimately, if I wanted to, I could repair this, take this one out, and I'd have a fixed element at that point. But I'm gonna take this further. I'm not gonna fix this element yet. Before we jump out of this, I do wanna jump back here and show you that you do have the ability to copy, export, and submit bugs. So if this is a test issue that I need help with, I can easily submit this directly into Azure DevOps. This is a one-time setup here that I'm going through, but we'll jump through it real quickly. Once we have that on the project, we don't have to do that again. But now here I can have it submit the bug for me. It's going to attach the failure details for me. We'll push this directly into Azure. We should get a response back here momentarily with which bug was created, and we did. Bug number 84 was just submitted. So this helps you create the feedback loop when you do discover things that you need help from the development team. When you found the bug that's holding back your production deployment, you can quickly submit it back into back into Azure with all of this failure details attached. So that gives you a way to really understand, is it something I can fix myself or something I need help with? Is it a test issue or an application issue? And from there, communicate it to the appropriate team members. Okay, so now we've got a broken test. Let me go ahead and show you how the new technology, the industry first image backup function can help us with this and how it makes these tests more bulletproof. So going up to the project settings here, the setting I had forgotten to turn off was this one right here, our new element images. There are a lot of recording settings in here, by the way, that help you change the way the tests execute and behave for different types of applications. And of course, the customizable find logic that's here that helps you locate elements across browser and across different UIs and so forth. Here in the element images, I have this disabled, but we're going to turn that on. So now it's going to use the image backup as well. So if we go back without changing our element, if we go back and just run this test again, we'll see that it should pass. By this time, finding the submit button, even though the element logic is still looking for it based off of GOAT. So this is going to say, hey, we can't find it with the logic you provided or the logic that was automatically created originally. That has changed or something's broken. So it's going to kick in the image backup here. You can see it's timing down, or it's counting out the timeout. After this 4 seconds elapses, it's going to kick in the image backup. And the image backup found it and it clicked it and it continued. So we still have a passing test. And we look at the log this time, you'll see that it gives us a warning that it was unable to locate it with the find expression, but that it was able to locate it with the image backup. So this really, really helps enhance your tests. That way, as UI changes or element logic changes, you have two different methods that help you locate those elements, can help you continue the test. And lastly, over here on the results, I just wanted to show you what it would look like if we have a test list that has a warning in it as well. You will see an indicator on the test list that indicates that there was a warning. And if we jump into the test steps here, you can see the step where the warning is as well. And you can easily go back from there to editing that element. So we're just going to jump back into editing the element real quick so we can fix what's broken. I'm going to have it run to a test step 2 so we can get the live environment up and running while we're doing our element editing. This helps you so that it can show you the live DOM of the application as well as the suggestions that it might have to help you fix those elements. So this is spinning up the recorder, executing the test to a certain step, and attaching the recording toolbar. Once that's done, it's going to attempt to locate that element for us again, bring back some the current DOM, and here in just a moment, it should be attaching the recorder. So now we're back to that spot in the test. We have the recorder attached. Back here in Test Studio, we can see the DOM come back for us. We can see that it's still complaining about the value there. I could modify this manually if I want to. I'm just going to click Update Filters. It's going to go find it for me. It fixed it for me. And actually over here, we also have other suggestions too that we could use to maybe strengthen this or add to this if we need to. So very easy to work with. Also, while I'm here, not only do we have this find logic, but we have the image itself. So let's go ahead and jump over to the element images. Here you can bring in the image. These are automatically captured for you. You have the ability to run to a specific step or maybe update it with a new image if you need to, and really just helps enhance that. You also have some settings as far as threshold goes and what steps might use that as well along the way. So there's the more accurate version of that image. So this gives us that backup methodology and that strength and stability of the test over time. All right, now, one way I was able to collaborate with the development team already was by providing the failure details in the form of a bug that we submitted to Azure. Another common way that testing teams collaborate with developers is when a function may require some code or possibly a helper class file can be created to take our test to the next level, right? So let's take this Amazon search test as an example. Maybe I wanted to data drive this with different search terms or a random string, for example. Well, lots of things in Test Studio have both a codeless way and a coded way to accomplish that. So real quick, I'm just going to create a new test. This is going to be my master Amazon test. And in this master Amazon test, I'm going to use a very popular feature called test to step, which allows you to take your modular tests and actually run them inside of other tests. So it's test within a test here. So as I open up this master test, I'm going to use test to step. You also see there's API test to step that lets you grab tests from your API projects. And we're going to be looking for the Amazon search test from iteration 2. We'll grab that. We're also going to add in another test to step that's going to act as my setup routine. And this is going to be our codeless, what was it called? This is going to be our random word extract there. Okay, so I'm going to add this one in as well. We'll reorder these so that I have them in the correct order. And so now what I have is a master test that calls 2 different subtests. Now I already had this one pre-built, but basically all it does is it goes to a random word generating website and it uses that extract function that I showed you earlier. Now I only need 1 random word for this test, so I've turned off the other steps, but I could use this to get me all sorts of different variables to set up my test. Now because I have this random word extract happening under this master test, I can actually share the value from the first test to the second test. So in fact, to make this easy on myself, I'm going to just go copy the variable name from the extract test. I'm going to jump back into the Amazon test, and I'm going to simply data drive this test step here. To do that, I can just go to the properties of that test step under the binding section, and here I can add my variable from the other test under the parent test. So we'll hit set, and now we actually have a data-driven component. So if we go back and run this master one more time, this time it will go out, it will find, it will grab the random variable, random word that's generated, and then it's going to bring that into my search test, and it's going to search Amazon for whatever random word we have. Now after this is done, I'm going to pass it over to Peter, who's going to show us how we could do this through code as well. So we wanted to show you the way that this could be done codelessly, in this case using a third-party kind of random word generator. And here we can see the outcome of that. And at this point, we're going to show you the option of how the same thing could be achieved with code as well. So Peter, I'm going to pass it over to you. Feel free to take it away.
Thank you, Andy. Let's give it a few seconds till I share my screen. All right, I think we should be all set right now. Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon to everyone. And thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Peter. I'm a certified Scrum Master and a Prince2 professional working with the guys from Test Studio team. But today, I'm going to play this specific role of the developer, the favorite persona of all QAs. Why are we doing that? Remember at the beginning, also Andy mentioned, and also in my intro, I do believe that Test Studio, on top of everything else, is also a collaboration tool. In general, collaboration is the key factor to success. We all know that, and it's not just a state of mind. You need the proper tooling to do that. In our case, we have Test Studio as the bridge between the developers and the QAs, built on top of TFS for this presentation. So apart from the standalone app, Test Studio can live within Visual Studio as an extension. You can see it here in my extensions menu, in a separate submenu for Telerik, where you can easily create a new project, which I'm not going to do for the sake of the demo. We already have a project created. Why is that? Because all of you would know that as a developer, I wouldn't like to leave my environment no matter what happens. I want to stay within my IDE, in our case Visual Studio, and I want to work there, but still I need to be a part of the project. I'll give you a very good example for collaboration. Currently, I'm working with Andy on the same project. We're not even on the same continent, right? We're thousands of miles away. And I'm going to show you how we can do this together. First, a few words about the Visual Studio plugin. It is built again on top of the Telerik testing framework, and it has the same productivity boosting features. Like Andy already showed you, it features a test recorder. Here I'm going to open a test. Actually, I have a test open already. And let's go here. We have the same test recorder here, where you can record a test right from Visual Studio. We can execute it too as well. We can run it with the debugger switched on or off. But since we're talking about Visual Studio and the developers, what is most interesting is that you can create code steps. Below, I can switch between the Element Explorer, Element Repository here, and the Step Builder. Same as what you already saw for Visual Studio standalone. And here I can create easily a code step, because this is what I want to do in Visual Studio as a developer. Easy as this. You can do it in any test. However, for the sake of this demo, I can see that the QA actually need my help. I can see it from the view history. So this guy is building this specific test for the random word generator, and there are two options for me to do. I can create a helper class, which is a file, which is actually the easiest option, because then this file can be reused among several other tests within the same project, or between different projects, if you want. Alternatively, I can just go and code the step and include it within the already created web test. Okay. For the sake of the demo, we have done both. So you can see here simple helper class showing a random string generator. After I create it, I can check it in for the guys so that they can get it within their Dev Studio, right? Or I can just go and find or create the test. It's already created, but I can do it from scratch. Here is a test, if I'm not mistaken. Just give it a second. Okay, so here's a test, and I can create the coded step inside. Okay. So these are the options that I can do as a developer, and after checking it in, my colleagues can get it back and have them in their projects. Okay. A few words about the extension itself, though, and several cool options and features that I can show you. So once you have a web test opened from Visual Studio, you can easily generate a unit test from it, right? And the cool part is that while the original Test Studio test remains intact, all the changes that made to it are not synced to the unit test, and vice versa. All the changes made to the unit tests are not synced back to the Test Studio dev test. Here is the option that you can use. Let me just close that. Here's the option that you can use. And of course, it goes to my other screen to generate a unit test and select your favorite testing framework if you want to do that. Okay. Apart from that, for each of the web tests that you have access to, you can view the code or create a code behind file. I'm going to show you that. This is the code generated for the entire test for every step, which you can copy to clipboard and then paste it somewhere else if you want. Or for every web test, you can create a code behind file. See? Here it is. And I can modify at any time. It's interesting to see where the code behind file appears. For this test, for example, it is right here. Okay. So in this ideal case, I would have already helped my colleagues. I'm going to check in everything so they can get it back and finish their tests successfully. And I'm going to hand over my colleague again. But before that, I want to use it to allocate 30 seconds to wish happy birthday to one of our team members, who is one of the key factors for the success of Test Studio as a product. I know you're listening, so happy birthday, Zach. You rock. And Andy, it's your show again.
Awesome. I echo that too. Happy birthday, Zach. All right, so switching back now, I can go grab the update from TFS. And here I have the test on my end with the new coded step. You can see that there's a built-in IDE inside of Test Studio as well. So you can do all the coding if you'd like directly in Test Studio. You can see there's IntelliSense built in to help you along the way too. So really you can live inside of the Visual Studio environment from the developer standpoint. If you are a more technical QA, you do have the ability to code everything if you'd like from within Test Studio directly. So looking at this test now, we have the code behind file, we have the coded step in there. The other nice thing about this is the other test steps remain codeless, right? So I could still maintain this test and get the help I need from Peter when I need it. If we go ahead and run this test one more time, you could see that this time, rather than using my random word from the random word generator that I originally did through the codeless operation, this time I'm going to run it with Peter's random word or random string generator and see how it does as well. So as you can see, we've only chosen 3 characters. This gives us a little higher degree of being able to locate something in Amazon that might match up. And as you can see, very quickly and easily, it executes that test. So now we've shown you a codeless way to do this, as well as a coded way to do this, and really the ability to work and collaborate between team members, between developer and QA, checking bugs in, checking in source control, making sure that we have the latest versions of things, and leveraging everybody's strengths, right? So as the QA, I probably know the application and how the users use it maybe a little better than Peter, but he knows how to build those functions for me that can help me make more robust tests. Helper class files can be used for setup and teardown routines, as well as any number of different things that you might want to work with on that too. All right, so for last but not least, we have about 6 minutes left. We want to make sure there's plenty of time for questions. So let me just jump back to the slideshow here and open it up for Q&A. And we're going to actually have Ilyan Panchev, our product manager, who might have a couple questions that he can throw out and answer for us. So Ilyan, take it away.
Thanks, Andy. Hello, everybody. So we have a lot of interesting questions from our questions panel, and we have few minutes more left. So I'll go with some of them. One of the most asked questions is there going to be a recording of this webinar? Yes, there will be a recording, and we'll send it later to everybody that's registered. So you'll be able to watch it later if you missed something. Another question is about the cool Visual Studio plugin that Peter showed. Is it included in Test Studio's edition? In what edition it is included? Yes, this is part of all Test Studio editions. And also, if you have DevCraft Ultimate license, you also get the Test Studio Visual Studio plugin in it. So if you're a QA and want to use the Visual Studio plugin and you have Test Studio Ultimate or Test Studio Web and Desktop, you can do it. if you're a developer and a customer of Telerik and have our awesome controls and components, and you have DevCraft Ultimate, you can also check our Visual Studio plugin out and use it for some testing. Another interesting question from James. What actions can we perform with these image elements? That's an interesting one. Actually, you can perform all the actions that you can do on a regular step with a regular element, because we don't just get the coordinates of the element by its image. We find which is the actual element and what type is this element. So, for example, if your DOM logic fails and we find the element by its image, we'll know that this is an input or this is a radio button or anything, and we'll do any action that is supposed to be done on this element. For example, if it's an input, we'll set a text there. If it's a button, we'll enable it or disable it or click it or whatever. So any actions are supported on all elements in Test Studio, no matter if they're found by the DOM logic or by the image. Another question, how are these images recorded? Well, when you record your tests in Test Studio Recorder, when you enable this option, all the images, all the elements and their images are being recorded automatically, which is great. So then after that, you can use them. If you want to update an image or upload a new image or slightly change it or something like this, you have our own image recorder. So when you go to an element and hit update image or edit image, we'll load that recorder where you can first of all validate if the existing image is there, and if it's not there, you can select any area of your web application and use it as the new image. So
great.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Elian, for that, and
Okay.
I'm sure we'll have some additional questions that we can provide in the follow-up blog post. If there's additional questions, we'll certainly help and try to get those answered for you as best as possible. So this brings us to the end of our presentation today. I want to thank you all for attending. This is really exciting to be able to show not just what we've had for a long time with the long-standing fine logic strategy that Test Studio uses, but now enhancing that even further with the image-based technology as well. So these two together really help you make your tests more bulletproof, as well as with the tooling that we have built in. It's approachable by any level of technical skill, and really encourages everybody to work together and collaborate together as well. For those of you that may already be working with Test Studio and you're maybe wondering how to get more out of it, we invite you to please reach out to us. We'd love to set up a call and talk to you about the new features and just take a look at what you're working with. And for those of you that are just looking for a tool, we'd be happy to help you as well. If you'd like to reach out, we can certainly set up some more maybe private demonstrations, go through more details, and show you more ins and outs. There's tons more than you've seen today. This is just the tip of the iceberg. If you think about what we can do for load testing, performance testing, mobile testing, API testing, on top of the functional regression kind of testing, there's also scheduling, there's the CI integration, there's just hours and hours worth of information that we can help you with, and we can make sure that this works for your projects and for your applications as well. So again, from me and from our team, I want to thank you for attending today, and have a great day.